13 minutes after 12 on the Saturday edition of All Angles with me, Cindy Mabi. Thanks so much for joining us. In a public-private partnership to eradicate gender-based violence, the Memeza Shout Crime Prevention Program has distributed 1,500 personal protection devices to shelters in Daveyton, Ekurhuleni. The program was made possible by the First Rand Empowerment Foundation and other like-minded organizations. Joining me is Elmarie Pereira, CEO at Memeza Shout Crime Prevention. Elmarie, good afternoon to you and thank you so much for joining us. Talk us about the successful launch of this program in eradicating gender-based violence. Of course, you started off in Daveyton, you're now currently in Limpopo.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and thank you for having Memeza on your show. Yes, the Systemic Gender-Based Violence Reduction Program, funded through the First Rand Empowerment Foundation, has kicked off in about July this year. As you mentioned, we first deployed in Daveyton, Gauteng, and we've now moved to Limpopo, the Chilwashiku community, which is one of the top 30 gender-based violence communities in South Africa. And what we are doing is providing tangible ways to combat gender-based violence at a community level.
Elmarie, is very concerning. If you look at the statistics, there are warnings all over the place to say this is a crime hotspot, be aware. And it doesn't seem like we're able to reduce the numbers of victims. But in this case, you decided to go to Daveyton. And the question is why, out of all the other hotspots that we are told about?
So from a funding point of view, the project will cover 18 gender-based violence hotspots over the next 3 to 5 years. And Daveyton and Chilwashiku in Limpopo is part of the top 30 hotspots that is identified by the South African Police Services. Cindy, I think we know how big the problem is, and getting to all communities is difficult, but the more partners we bring on board, the more communities will be able to service.
Yeah, and through this collaboration, and make me understand that over and above having to take self-defense classes, carrying a pepper spray or pocket knife, or even arming ourselves as women, it really is very difficult living in South Africa, where you can't walk freely. You always have to watch yourself, let alone the violence that is also in the household. How are these personal protective devices going to help women in this case?
So what we do through our partnerships is provide women with tangible safety tools. One of them, as you mentioned, the Memeza personal alarm system, which is a device that helps you when you're walking down the road and you feel that you are in danger. You pull this pin and it makes a sound of 140 decibels, and that chases away criminals. So I think the first step that women need to take, and the founder, Tuli Mtetwa of Memeza, through her own gender-based violence history, and myself losing family members due to gender-based violence, all of those cases proven that those women did not have something to reach out to let other people know that they are in trouble. And this is what we're equipping women with now. These devices that makes you pull a pin and it makes a sound, or something that we install in the household, which is the community alarm system, which means you press a panic button and your local police services and community members are informed if you're in trouble, or our Safer City mobile application that means that from anywhere you can press a panic and you will receive assistance.
And Elmarie, particularly what you're talking about, the quick response when you are in distress and you need immediate help, that you can trust that somebody is going to respond to that call. And that's not necessarily always the case with the hotline, the 10111. So how is this one then connected to all these other policing forums for the response to be on time?
Cindy, this is what makes the Memeza intervention so different, and a 360, look around how do we improve this response mechanisms available at a community level. So what we do when we distribute these devices, we bring on local partners on the ground, which includes the South African Police Services, community policing forums, local private security industry, community members themselves, because what we want to do is make sure that when you are in trouble and you send a message, it's not only an SAPS that gets a message or responds. There is a community community response that will now make sure we improve and fasten the response to gender-based violence so that we can prevent and lessen the number of victims we have at the end of the day.
Yeah, part of the program as well, speaking to stakeholders, is how then to bridge that trust deficit, that gap between communities not being able to either report cases because of fear of further victimization, and the police being able to do their work. How do you then bridge that communication divide?
I think it's all about awareness, Cindy, at the end of the day. And one of the things that we do through our partnerships like First Rand Empowerment Foundation and, the South African Police Services, the Civilian Secretariat for Police, is a lot of focus on harnessing and creating communication in communities around how to treat gender-based violence. Who can you trust? Not only the community members, but also from a South African police perspective. So we involve all of those stakeholders and community members to ensure that trust is built and that communication channels are open, so that, when you do need help, they are there to assist you. So we also empower and uplift the local community policing forum members, local social workers, working with the South African Police Services to build those community trusts, because it's very important in the fight against gender-based violence.
Yeah, we're often told that your socio-economic challenges, such as poverty, inequality, unemployment, also contribute to gender-based violence. But almost sometimes it's psychoanalyzing the perpetrator and making it safe for them to continue what they're doing, because there is these adverse conditions that they have to endure. So how then are we able to deal with all these other contributing factors to gender-based violence to ensure that women and children are safe?
That's a very valid point, Cindy, and I think that's why one of the reasons before Memeza goes into a community, we analyze the community itself and establish what are the major contributors in that specific community that leads to this increased rates of gender-based violence. And based on those findings, we will then incorporate certain, deployment methods within our programs that we deploy to ensure we address that. We also work with schools, for instance. So if we see that in a certain community, there's a lot of patriarchy and there's, a serious need for young men, even at a primary school level, young boys to learn about what does gender-based violence mean, what is your role as a boy and as a growing man in your family. We even start at that level to make sure that it's, as I said, a 360 view around and intervention around gender-based violence. So it's not a quick fix. And this is why we're so grateful for the partners that we have on board, because it is a long-term intervention with a systemic reduction in gender-based violence that we want to last and change the face of gender-based violence in South Africa.
And Elmarie, we commend you, your partners and other NGOs on the ground that work with limited resources and having to deal, as you were saying, a systemic problem that will take generations to fix. But I just want to quickly touch on, before we let you go, on the budget cuts and how you have been impacted as NGOs or foundations in dealing with gender-based violence.
It is, as an NGO, always difficult. We always have to make do with budgets, and we all know what the need is out there. So it has impacted us. But luckily, we have good relationships with our funders, where there's a good communication flow to say that these are the financial impacts that we see with the weakening of the rand, and, the manufacturing of the tools that we distribute. How do they then come on board and help us make sure that these impacts, economic impacts, doesn't impact the communities that we need to serve? So it has an impact, but luckily with partners like the First Rand Empowerment Foundation, they're fully on board to see how they can assist throughout the whole life cycle and value chain of the products and gender-based violence tools that we provide to communities.
Yeah, and are these devices readily available, even if one doesn't necessarily live in these under-resourced communities?
They are available from Memeza directly through our website, www.memeza.co.za. They are currently not available in the shops. We are looking at potentially rolling that out in the new year, but we do ship countrywide. So anybody that would need one, you're welcome to contact us.
Elmarie, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. That's Elmarie Pereira, CEO at Memeza, Shout Crime Prevention, speaking to us about their gender-based violence campaign that provided protective alarms for those in distress. And for more information, go to memeza.co.za. Memeza.co.za.